I don't think it's any secret that over the last couple weeks, or maybe even last month, the crisis at the border is getting worse again. And there's kind of now a spotlight on Biden's administration. Will he be different from his predecessors, or is it more of the normal? So today, Drew and I are going to touch up on that. How was that Meghan Markle thing? We're going to talk about that today, right? I think we're going to spend the whole hour talking about that interview.
I bet you some people would want us to, but no, thankfully not.
That's fair. Yeah. It'd be a little bit, well, I don't know if it's actually lighter than this one, but different. I think this one is a little bit heavier. But yeah, so today, immigration. And before we get going, I kind of just, for some of our listeners, wanted to give a background really as quickly as I can, just kind of over Obama, Trump, into Biden, just because I think it's important to have some context to the situation. So basically, prior to the COVID pandemic, Mexico was actually quite instrumental in helping lower immigration to the U.S. border. Trump takes all the credit, which he definitely does get some credit for the deterrence that he did. But AMLO, who's Mexico's president, he said that he was going to be a champion of the working class and a champion for immigrants. But actually, he was quite hawkish and violent towards immigrants on Mexico's southern border. And there's videos of, I think it was back in 2020, The Guardian talked about how Mexico was tear gassing Guatemalan immigrants, locking them up. So they were kind of doing what a lot of U.S. Border Patrol were doing to then the people on the southern border of the U.S. And so it was kind of between the U.S., Trump, and Mexico who kind of changed this whole system. And prior to COVID, immigration was really low because Mexico was kind of at the actual border wall, in my opinion, between Central America and the United States. And so this was kind of coupled with Trump's, what was it called? The Remain in Mexico policy, which allowed, U.S. border officers to return non-Mexican asylum seekers to dangerous places in Mexico as their claims were processed. Not great. There was a lot of issues, with family separations linked with that. And in a nutshell, this did not have a great look for humanitarian reasons. And this, although did change last March when at the onset of the pandemic, the Trump administration basically started just doing a catch and release policy under the guise of public health, where instead of detaining people, they were basically just turning away illegal border crossers and throwing them back into Mexico. And this actually incentivized them to keep trying to come back. And so then let's flash forward to now. Border crossings are up just significantly. Usually in January and February, it's a low kind of dip just because of weather and other things. But now going into 2021, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol say that there's been an average of 3,000 arrests per day along the southern border. And yeah, I just wanted to add that Biden now is kind of in an interesting place going into this because in Obama's administration, he was actually pushing to invest in Central America, but it was met with kind of mixed results because Biden was actually the stricter one of the two inside of Obama's administration. They wanted to show force at the border. And they were also kind of large deporters, and they were the ones that built the facilities that are so controversial now. And I think the criticism of the Trump administration was because his administration was centered on deterrence, scaring people from coming to the border. And he kind of squeezed it from both sides. He squeezed the process from Mexico and then made it harder for kids to be released once they were inside of the United States. And now Biden, I think, is in a tough spot because he one thing says, we don't want people coming right now, but then at the same time, he wants to be more humanitarian. So we're at a point where we're seeing this spike in these facilities again, and a lot of people on the more progressive left are angry. The right is angry for other reasons. So sorry, long rant there, Drew, but what do you think so far about all this stuff?
Oh, I mean, gosh, Jesus. I think that one is it's very obvious that with the shift in administration, there is a shift in tone regarding the way the United States is viewing immigration. It was no secret that the Trump administration, they explained it themselves, that it was about deterrence. It was the idea that they wanted to make it difficult for people to come and cross the U.S. border in a plethora of ways, whether that was the asylum process, having to stay in your asylum in the country you're seeking asylum from during that process, or if it was building a wall, if it was separating children from their parents at the border. It was a ploy. It was a plot to deter people from coming. They basically wanted to make it difficult to do that. I think that Biden's administration is taking a different turn. I don't think that deterrence is really their main goal. What their main goal is a little bit harder to say, though. I think they probably want what's called comprehensive immigration reform, which is a kind of a giant umbrella term for various immigration policies that have been proposed for the last 20 years. And that's kind of what I do want to dig into today is what like we know that the Biden administration wants to reform our immigration policy. They obviously view Trump's deterrence policy as a non-humanitarian. But what does that reform look like? And what does that mean for the United States? And how do we view immigration as a whole? It's really, really complicated. I am not even 100% confident in my own opinions on this matter. But I think in general, one is that we do have to we do have to be humanitarian in the way we deal with immigration. So first off, I do think that it's a good thing that we really look at the facilities that we were putting some of these children in, and why do we separate people for so long, and how did we lose complete knowledge of where 200 plus kids had even went at one point. So the humanitarian aspect needs to be reinstated at the very least in our immigration policy.
Absolutely, I totally agree, and I think this will be an interesting conversation. The one thing I'll just add to it is it kind of just a general thought is that I feel like it's going to be an issue for Biden because his administration and mainly kind of the messaging from the left is that they're being more open. I don't want to say that the left is open borders because I don't think that's true, but they definitely want to have more comprehensive and accepting immigration policy. I think as a blanket statement, that's something kind of safe to say, and so there's this general idea in Central America, mainly, places like El Salvador, Honduras, stuff like that, that these people are like, hey, Biden's the president now. He's not Trump. And so now we feel more like we're more welcome. And the problem is Biden him and Jen Psaki have both said that they are actually not particularly for people coming right now. So I feel like the administration, like in public image, seems to be more open towards immigration, but the day-to-day stuff might not be changing so much. It's early to tell, but I think it's going to be a bit of a conundrum for the administration going forward.
Yeah, I mean, one is just you might be right. Like, I imagine there are probably people that think that now that Biden is the president, that they have a way greater chance of getting in the U.S., which may not necessarily be true. So that might be one aspect. Two is it might be similar to everything else related to coronavirus. As soon as people think they have the ability to do something again, they're going to start doing it again. So maybe because, I mean, for example, if you're talking about like legal immigration procedures, embassies that review visa applications were closed for months, right? So even our already slow lurching immigration process was halted and stunted for a whole year. So, whether it's legal or illegal immigration, both of which, had stalled because of the pandemic. So when those avenues open up again, there's going to be a large influx of people that might seem like a massive spike. Like I do think that perhaps Biden becoming president does shape the way people view their immigration, but I also think it might also be a part of the coronavirus seeming like it's on a tail end and people thinking that I can move around again. So it might be a combination of those things is why we're seeing that spike. I can understand also why the Biden administration doesn't want a record spike of influx. One is in their first few months of office, that does put them in a conundrum where it's a very, very sensitive topical wedge issue of immigration. And then two is the coronavirus spreading. It looks bad if you're letting hundreds of thousands of people in the midst of a pandemic. But the reality is you can't just halt immigration completely. Not only was that, again, humanitarian issues, but two, there's economic implications for halting seasonal workers, the normal influx of immigration. So, it's a very complicated, multifaceted issue. We should look, however, at what Biden has already done regarding immigration in his first month or so. I'm just reading here from the migrationpolicy.org that among the 17 executive actions are things signed by the president that go kind of over Congress's head, for those that don't know. Among the 17 executive actions Biden signed his first afternoon in office were the rescission of the Trump travel ban on nationals from a number of predominantly Muslim countries. This was I don't know, you remember, right? This was kind of when ISIS was at their peak, that Donald Trump decided to ban certain immigration from Muslim countries. That was rescinded. The construction on the wall was stopped. They're relooking at DACA, and then they're rolling back expansive deportation rules. So and then this one is interesting. His administration has also announced a 100-day moratorium on virtually all deportations. So a stoppage. Not forever, but for 100 days, they're just like stopping virtually all deportations from the U.S. interior, though that was stopped by a federal judge's order. And that's one that I found really interesting, because I'm actually on board with pretty much everything up until that one. I'm not sure why he stopped all deportations for 100 days.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. That was the one that I actually highlighted it when you sent that part of the article. I was like, that's interesting, because to me, that just seems to pave the way for another child separation situation, because already there are a lot of unaccompanied children trying to get across the border. Now, some of them may be, in a serious issue, separated from their parents. Others, there may be child trafficking. I think there's a myriad of reasons why that's happening. But to me, it says if they're trying to actually halt deportations, it just seems like it's going to create another child facility chaotic situation that no one really wants. And that's probably my one big critique, I guess, so far of the whole Biden administration's policies, are that it seems like they're less focused on deterrence, which I know deterrence under the Trump way isn't always the best, but they're let me rephrase. They're less focused on limiting the influx of people and more focused on kind of accommodating them once they've crossed the border. I'm not saying accommodating like letting them just stay here all good, but it seems like to me it could be paving a way for a lot of issues. And now I agree with the other stuff, like DACA, trying to get that permanent, the Muslim travel ban, which I thought was just chaotic and hard to follow. And so yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things in there, and I think that's why I think a lot of people are just really unsure what Biden's policy is, and I think both of us have kind of mentioned that too so far.
And I think a lot of and that's because immigration reform in of itself is ambiguous, kind of a massive idea. Because you and I have grown up in America in the 2000s. We've heard the phrase comprehensive immigration reform for decades, dude. Like you've heard it on news since 2002. What does that mean? I think the problem is it is too strenuous and difficult for good applicants to get in the country. Like people that want to come here, live well, right? Become a member of society. So much it's so strenuous and difficult that so many people go the route of undocumented immigration. And it's I think that the process needs to be easier, because I genuinely believe that immigration provides a net positive. This idea that immigrants somehow leech off of our society is that's not really found to be in the data. In fact, it's the opposite. They found that immigration, large swaths of immigration lead to economic booms. They overall have a net good output for society, right? 50 to 75% of undocumented immigrants pay income taxes, let alone state and other taxes. This is based off of, I have it here somewhere, Bipartisan Policy Center, right? And so the idea that immigration is somehow dragging us down, I don't see that to be true. I mean, obviously some individuals, I'm sure, but overall immigration is a good thing for this nation, has been historically, and I think that we should really try and make it easier for people to become a member of that society. Now, it's easier said than done, but I think that comprehensive immigration reform has to look at the H-1B program, which is how employers can hire foreign nationals to work here, and it's very limited. There's a plethora of things, and again, I'm no expert, but it seems to me like it's so difficult to become an American citizen, and it should be easier so that we have less people incentivized to go the illegal route.
Yeah, and the one thing I will add though is that when you and I talked about, I think it was like one of our first episodes that we did, so back in 2019 over the summer, when there was, the other caravan kind of growing crisis. And I remember, I wish I still had the article, I can try to find it, but the US is actually not as restrictive as I think a lot of people think.
Sure.
Like comparatively to Canada, Germany, like some of these other, I guess, more Western wealthy countries, the U.S. is actually quite, I don't want to say open, because obviously under Trump that completely just declined
No,
dramatically.
it certainly is more open than other nations like Australia.
And Canada, Germany, the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
But my issue is that I think we need to focus on one thing at a time here. Like, I actually really agreed with the Obama administration's amnesty types of policies, granting legal citizenship to people that are inside of the United States already, because I think that's something that's a net gain for everyone. They're paying into the system. There's records of people. So if there is crime or health issues, whatever it may be, they're in the system. They're paying into the system. They're part of the system. And I agree with you. I don't think immigrants are always mooching off the system. I think that's just kind of an old trope that doesn't make sense anymore. My bigger issue is that the scope and size of it right now, like, on an air, and this is kind of a cheesy comparison, but it's like on an airplane, they always tell you to put on your air mask before you save your child, right? And I've always kind of had a view of immigration, especially now with the pandemic, the economy, and all these other issues. Like, I think we need to help our own people before we're focused on making immigration easier. That's just my opinion. Obviously, like, I think it could be debated, like the scope of people coming in, but it's just right now, I don't know if it's the time to expand it or make it easier.
I don't buy that argument, because one is you can't do two things at once, right? Like, it's not like our government, like the agencies involved in immigration are not also spending their time fighting the coronavirus. Those are two separate things for different agencies. So I don't see that. I don't see it like the can we do both issue as a problem. I think we can. Two is I really struggle when I hear the argument about what about our people first. Is that excuse was used even when I was working with charities to get donations for kids in other countries. People would say all the time, well, we need to help American kids first, and it's like, yeah, I mean, we do, but it doesn't. Why does there have to be a first? I think. Go ahead.
I would just say, though, because I mean, I do think that there's a kernel of truth to it, especially when the countries that in Central America specifically are basically just in complete turmoil. The people are literally coming here with nothing. I understand that we need to maybe build up our asylum process more, but I don't think that we always have all the infrastructure to deal with all of this. And then again, like, if you look at Obama and Trump's administration, look at what an influx happens is that we end up with these detainment centers. And obviously, I understand your point is that if we made it easier to get legal citizenship, but it's just like, it's just that snowballing down the road. And like, I will admit, I don't know enough on the specifics of how to do that. I am definitely not an immigration expert, but I do think that there's a feeling, especially like in the United States, that are we in the best position right now to be letting other people in, And I think we've always been kind of expected to. And I don't know. That's my theory.
I see what you're saying. I see, especially in the midst of a pandemic. And I do believe that the government should reserve the right to limit immigration within reason. I don't think ever to zero, but like,
right.
I do think that perhaps in times of serious crises, that a nation state should have the hard and soft power to limit immigration for within reason, again, and within certain guidelines. So I'm not like open borders, but but again, I still want to bring back the argument that like immigration is not like fixing immigration. It will not be like a sunken cost. Fixing immigration will be a net benefit for the economy in the long run. Having a smooth, swift immigration system that allows for, like better services and economic activity will only benefit everyone. So it's not like, to me, it's not like we fixing that problem now, or like, can we fix that problem later because we have to focus on other things now? It's like, no, fixing this problem now will help bring our economy back out of the coronavirus recession. Like, it's tied in. Again, like I seriously think that you're right about these fluxes are not our fault, right? Like the idea that now we have played a hand in Central America, but like the United States, the current administration, whether it's Trump or Biden, it was not responsible for the gangs in El Salvador that are causing a mass, like exoduses out of the country. That's just true. We didn't expect that, but we have to at least understand that we have to have some infrastructure for these big fluxes, and that's kind of the problem we're seeing. Is you were correct in that we don't currently have the infrastructure for these massive influxes of immigration, and we should. And I don't think that the attitude in which we deal with these influxes should be that of deterrence. It should be that of a humanitarian mindset first. But then, of course, you want to have national security involved. I've always thought that when dealing with immigration, you should be incredibly tough on like criminal offenders. I think that if you're an undocumented immigrant and you commit a felony in the United States, you're gone. That's it. You lost your chance. Like I don't see that there's any need for like grace in that scenario. But if you're misdemeanor level crime, drug related issues, like these are not things I don't think we should like throw away the American dream for people. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? I know it's a lot. Like,
Absolutely.
We're dealing with a lot of stuff here, but I do think that like comprehensive immigration reform should not be a can we kick any farther down the road, even if it's uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And the olive branch I would put out to you on this one is that I think, because I'm not totally against deterrence as a general idea. I am extremely against the deterrence the Trump administration used, because like most of Trump's policies, it was very half-assed. And I think that was why we saw, grammar problems here, why we saw a big influx in these child facilities and extended child separations under him, was because the administration did not do a good job of keeping tabs. And that is something that I think shows that the administration never really actually cared too much about actually following through with how to deal with the problem. It was more just deterrence, and a bad type of deterrence that arguably violates a lot of human rights. And I think the UN Human Rights Council has actually been looking into it, as well as other organizations. But now, going into the bill right now that was sent to Congress a few weeks ago, the US Citizenship Act, I actually like some things in it. I don't like all of it, and I don't think it's going to pass through the Senate, unfortunately, because I've seen people like Tom Cotton and even more moderate Republicans completely just against it. And they would need, as far as I know, in the Senate, they would need 10 Republicans to stop the filibuster. Mm-hmm. So probably not going to pass, but there's some cool things about it. The one for me that's actually really crucial, and it's kind of been Biden's thing even when he was in the Obama administration, was tackling instability in Central America in the hope of, just reducing some of the flows here, trying to at least help fix the problems at their source. And Biden, back in the Obama days, was crucial in going to places like Guatemala and Honduras and meeting with leaders and trying to help with this. And so I like that. I also like that they want, to give legal status to up to, I think it was 11 million undocumented migrants. That's better for everyone, right? Because we have not only just tabs on American citizens, but we also have them paying in, and we can help them or kick them out if we need to. And then also, there's and actually one of the things you were talking about too is immigration courts. He wants to put more resources into immigration courts, because I definitely agree with you on that one, because one of the big problems during the Trump era and even parts of the Obama era was that, say you had someone from El Salvador get caught crossing the border into the US, all of a sudden they're not just sent back to El Salvador, they're just sent to Mexico to wait until their case is brought up in the US courts. And what happens to that person in that period? It could be months, maybe even years. And that's a serious problem. So, I mean, I can agree to disagree with you on maybe the metaphysical ideas of immigration in the United States, but I would agree with you that it's here and we need to fix it.
Certainly, the court issue, the backlog. I think there was a John Oliver episode one time about the backlog of these immigration cases is ridiculous. One guy was like, oh, like here's your immigration case. Like, you need to appear before court in 2025 to just like begin the process of the next, court date. And you're like, holy cow. Right. So obviously, and that should not be the norm, right? That should not be the norm, regardless of immigration status or why you're there or whatever. Whether or not they say yes or no, it should be done a lot swifter than years and years down the line. So yes, absolutely, we should, at the very least, fund these courts and the systems in place to at least chug along the process quicker than it is. Yeah, I'm reading the White House. I mean, obviously whitehouse.gov, right? This is the White House talking about their own bill, so it's going to make it look really good. So obviously, grain of
Yeah.
salt. But I mean, it does seem like, they want to keep the families together, right? Obviously, a big campaign thing from Biden for the whole, in his election. But crack down on criminal organizations. Enhances the ability to prosecute individuals involved in smuggling and trafficking networks, especially exportation of migrants. I think that 100%. Crack down on coyotes, crack down on human traffickers, 100%. I mean, I'm all for that. I think if you balance out allowing people that want to better their lives, make that easier for them to do, and then crack down on those that want to abuse our system. Now, easier said than done, obviously, but if you make that the kind of the balance and the goal, I think that would be kind of a bipartisan way to do it.
Definitely agreed. No, and I also remember hearing, I think it was on a podcast, so it's a little vague, the details, but they were talking about how, I think it was under the Trump administration and prior during the Bush years as well, that some of these people that were deported were like, some of these like huge criminals were deported and were actually involved in kind of bringing back MS-13 and these other groups to Central America. So that's also a problem, is that they never faced accountability in the United States. So then all of a sudden they're going back and causing more issues in their own country too. So no, I mean, it's a completely broken process. And I don't think we can keep going back and forth pendulum shift every 4 years. You know what I mean? Like, it's just something that's not sustainable. And I think that's actually probably part of the reason why we're seeing the issue now with the border crisis,
I think that's a really good point. Also, real quick, Code Dancer, thank you for the follow. I want to just read his comment, too. I think it's too easy to blame the U.S. for all the problems in Central America, Africa, or the South Pacific. It's much less palpable to say that local corruption and cultural differences are in part responsible for the problems in those places face. I mean, certainly there is no one catalyst for all the world's problems, right? So to say the U.S. is responsible for everything bad, it would be, a ridiculous statement. So I agree with you there. I mean, look, certainly El Salvador is locally, El Salvador, its infrastructure is crumbling. On Honduras, right? Corruption is rampant, even within Mexico. Cartel corruption is rampant. How do you reduce that kind of? How do you reduce that on its populations from afar as a foreign entity is hard. I mean, the United States, anytime the United States wants to get involved in something like that, it raises a lot of eyebrows, for better or worse. So I'm not exactly sure how you would go about that, but I mean, humanitarian aid to El Salvador, Guatemala, I don't know, political pressure to reform, but again, easier said than done when you're dealing with United States putting its fingers in other people's business. But I certainly agree with you, Code Dancer, that not all of this immigration influx is the U.S.'s fault, but it's certainly a problem that is on our doorstep. And I think that Alex just brought up a great point, which was the fact that our administrations do change every 4 to 8 years can lead to this ebb and flow of immigration law that people will find it's almost like this all this like stock talk these days of like buy the dip. This is almost like the dip in the immigration seriousness, right? Like, buy the dip. Biden got in. It might be a little bit lenient for a couple of years, so buy the dip. I don't know. It's a weird analogy. I'm not trying to make it like a stock thing, but I'm just trying to give an idea of I can see how there's opportunists that see maybe a more lenient administration. And that's an issue that America has designed into itself, baked into our politics for almost everything, is that administrations change and our promises shift.
Yeah. And the one thing I would just say to Code Dancer, just because that got me thinking, is you're right. We can't blame the U.S. for everything, but we can blame systems. And for me, it's always just been that the West found a lot of resources, and they found guns and they found boats, and they were able to exploit people for their resources, and they used force to do so. And those residual effects are still out there, especially in places like Africa and Latin America. And so I don't think you can just separate the two easily. That's all. I'm going to leave it there because that's a whole other topic. But yeah, but Drew, I think you're right. And I mean, yeah, I think we see it with everything. Foreign policy. There was obviously a difference between when Bush was president and Obama. We saw like Russia try to take advantage of Obama. Like, this stuff happens all the time in a myriad of different topics, right? But I just think that I hope that the Biden administration can actually pass legislature, not just executive orders, because as we know, those can just keep overturning every 4 to 8 years, and that's a problem. The one thing I did want to ask you about, which is also in the Biden bill, it really quickly is Trump's executive order that sought to punish sanctuary cities. What do you think we do with that whole concept of sanctuary cities?
Well, again, this is like the concept of sanctuary city to me is like is evidence of I don't know, maybe some of the failures of our federalist system a little bit. Like in my opinion, like I was even going to mention this was because I see California. I mean, live in California, I see this all the time. Whereas they'll make undocumented immigrants get access to government services that citizens also get. And while I believe that those people, those individuals should get those services, I just believe that they should be absorbed into society as like with a legal status to then get those services. Like the problem is on the federal level. On the federal level, we're not letting a lot of people become citizens quick enough or easy enough, or just there's so many, right? For the plethora of issues we've talked about, there's a lot of people that want to become citizens that aren't. And the federal government is preventing that. And so states like California that view themselves as very progressive will, in their view, make up the difference by then providing undocumented immigrants the ability to have driver's licenses, the ability to vote in school boards, the ability to apply for Medicaid, right? To make up the difference. And then and the sanctuary city is a part of that. I think that it's putting a Band-Aid on the wound, where in reality I think we should just make the system in and of itself better to have these people get those services without having individual states kind of circumvent the federal government. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, I think that was really well said. Yeah, like I think it does show just how like fractured and divided our country is on like just a range of issues. I mean, it's kind of a loose comparison, but I mean, think about the lifting of mask mandates, and I think it's like 13 states now. It's kind of a similar thing where the federal government says one thing, and some certain states are like, yeah, but we're gonna either make up or maybe not make up for whatever this rule is. So I agree with you, and actually that's a really good point that it does seem to show issues with our federal immigration system. Now, I mean, I think that also unfortunately just fuels the somewhat culture war, but that's a whole other topic again. Yeah, I don't know if do you have any more thoughts on this one, or do you think that should wrap it up for today on the lovely topic of immigration?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I mean, again, this is one of those topics that you literally could have an entire podcast, and I think there are whole YouTube channels dedicated to immigration law and all that. So if you're definitely interested in that topic, go for it and go forth and research. But certainly, I think that this issue will not go anywhere. It's going to come back around time and time again. I'm interested to see how far the Biden administration is willing to go with what they view as comprehensive immigration reform. I think that the conversations around immigration have certainly changed with the Trump administration. So the language we use around like separating families and stuff like that, the humanitarian aspect is kind of on the forefront. I think that's a good thing. That humanitarianism is like that conversation of bringing that humanity back to our immigration is important. But there's a lot of other aspects we need to look at as well, of course. So this issue is not going anywhere. It's been here for decades. It's just kind of where the immigration is coming from is shifting, and that's kind of interesting as well. I have nothing else to add right now. Obviously, we can only scratch the surface so much with our time on these topics. So definitely, if you're out there listening and we found this interesting, look into it yourself.
Absolutely. And yeah, take care as always. And as usual, you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, here on Twitch. Usually once a week we stream. Let us know what you think. Do you have any ideas for people we should bring on? Are you a political expert? Let us know, and take care. And we'll be back with another episode later. Thanks.